Number 1. In Dupont, Illinois, where the long end of McBride Avenue meets the bluffs, there is a rocky outcropping known as the Plateau. The plateau sits about 100 feet above the street, and it's a perfectly flat surface that overlooks the entire neighborhood. There were always rumors of the plateau being haunted. During the 70s and early 80s, it was a popular hangout for kids who liked to party and drink beer. When you visited the plateau, there was several years worth of graffiti painted every flat surface. Most of the graffiti was either class of 19XX, someone loves some other person, or 420 related. Regardless, it was a cool place to check out. There was always a long street at the base of the plateau where you could park. From here, the hike to the plateau was rather a short walk up a steep hill. The problem with parking here was that if the cops saw your car, they would either give you a ticket or wait to harass you when you came down. The safest place to park was half a mile down the road at the Falling Springs Tavern. Since the bar was always filled with patrons, there were always vehicles in the parking lot. It was a safe place to stash your car. But from here you have to hike back about half a mile uphill through the woods. The trailhead started at the end of the parking lot across the creek, but there was always a chance that you would disturb someone making out or shooting up. Now, when I was in high school, there were rumors that a satanic cult was performing rituals and holding black masses at the plateau. Fellow students who lived in McBride claimed to have seen their campfires and the carcasses of sacrificed animals. At school, one of my friends told me about a severed deer's head on a stick that was positioned to look out towards the street. After school, I decided to drive past the plateau, and I saw the deer's head. This just incensed my curiosity, but I had to go to work in a couple of hours, so I decided to come back later that night. In high school, I worked at a national supermarket and normally got off work at around 10 PM. My uniform consisted of a black pair of jeans, work boots and a brown smock. The perfect attire for lurking around in the woods at night. I decided to stash my car in the Falling Springs Tavern parking lot and take the long trail through the woods to the plateau. I remember there was a brilliant moon that night. You almost didn't need a flashlight because the moon shining through the tree canopy was bright enough to light up the trail. The moonlight through the tree branches would cast these eerie shadows. When the wind blew, the branches would sway and the shadows would move. So it looked as if everything in the woods was moving towards you in the darkness. It was the perfect setting for visiting a haunted site. As in most scary situations, time seems to slow down. It seemed like it took me forever to reach the plateau. I remember how bright it was that night when I emerged out of the woods and into the clearing that was plateau. Because of the full moon, everything was perfectly clear. There was this bright clearing surrounded by a curtain of darkness formed by the woods behind you. Out in the distance, you could see the multicolored lights that made up the St. Louis skyline. Beneath the plateau, the only thing I could see was a single streetlight. As I walked across the plateau, I saw a pentagram painted on the ground covered in dried candle wax. There was also some sort of rune writing painted in various places around the pentagram, so it definitely looked like someone was trying to hold a cult ritual here. But what I didn't know was how long ago. I was sitting with my legs dangling over the edge of the cliff and admiring the view. I kept thinking I was hearing something off in the distance behind me, so I was constantly looking over my shoulder to see if anyone was there. Since I never saw anything, I continued to stay sitting on the edge and enjoying the view. When I got up to leave, several people stepped out of the darkness wearing what appeared to be black hoodies. I started to run towards the trail and of course, they decided to give chase. One of them was fast enough to get between me and the trail. This person then turned and started running towards me. They stumbled into a deep fissure in the rock surface and tripped. When they fell, I heard what sounded like their legs snapping. The person started screaming in agony, and it sounded like it could have been a girl. A few of them broke off their pursuit to check on their friend, and the rest continued to pursue me down the trail. In my youth, I was a pretty fast runner, and I was able to gain a little distance. Then, I decided to dart off into the woods. About 25 feet off the trail, I found the perfect place to hide. I heard them pass by me, but I remained still. A few minutes later, I heard them coming back up the trail, shining their flashlights into the woods looking for me. Lucky for me, I was pretty good at hide and seek. I stayed in my hiding place for a few more minutes until I was sure they were gone. Then I continued as quickly and as quietly as I could back to my car. Now, it was a Friday night when I decided to explore the plateau, and I was a little worried about going back to school on Monday morning. I worried if they were able to identify me, but I thought to myself, if they were able to, surely they would have called me out by my name during the foot chase or while they were searching. Dupont High School had around 300 students, and like every small school, everyone knew everybody. So I was a little apprehensive about the possibility of having to face members of a satanic cult Monday morning. Monday came and went. Tuesday came and went, and nobody approached me about being up on the plateau. Wednesday I was standing in the cafeteria lunch line, and I saw a girl in a black hoodie wearing a cast on her right leg. The same leg the person would have broken that night on the plateau. I know she lived on McBride with her aunt and recently transferred in from neighbouring Cahokia High School, but she was too new to know me, and she hung out with a different clique. Had she not been the new girl in school, she probably would have recognised me that night. I decided to keep the incident to myself and not to share my experience with any of my friends. I had gotten away clean, and I saw no need to gossip and stir up a hornet's nest for myself. Number 2. It was the summer of 1994, and me and some of my friends were driving around in my friend's late model 2-door hardtop Impala. We decided to go pay this cult a visit. We were headed down Route 50 just outside Owensville towards Milford. The road we turned down was Stone Lick Road. Now, on that road is a very old covered bridge which is said to be haunted. My friends and I always thought that people said that to keep kids from playing on the bridge several years before a garbage truck fell through the bridge, but I don't remember if anyone got hurt. We drove down this road until we came to a road called Bolsheiser Lane, which is a dead-end road. This is a tree-lined road about 1 lane wide. We get to the end and had to turn around. One of my friends got out to help the driver get the car turned around without coming off the road or hitting anything. On his way back in the car, we played the old joke of pulling up every time he went to get in the car. When he finally got in the car, he showed us a knife that he had found in a tree. We thought nothing of it and decided to go and have some fun on the covered bridge. We came to the bridge and the driver of the car proceeded to power brake the old Impala. The bridge filled with tire smoke and we were all laughing and having a good time. That's when someone or something opened the driver's door and reached in for the keys. I was sitting in the passenger side seat and was watching as my friend was using his free hand to try to keep the strange arm from getting to the keys. Just as I was reaching over to help, someone grabbed me by my shirt collar and was trying to drag me from the car. I was scared stiff. I could not move or scream. Just then, the car lurched forward and we came out of the bridge. The door of the car hit the side of the bridge, knocking whoever had my shirt loose, and we went speeding down the road. None of us could believe what had just happened. We decided to go into Milford and go to a gas station and try to regroup. As we were coming to the end of Stone Lick Road, a large pickup truck was coming behind us fast. The truck stayed about 2 or 3 feet from the back of the car with its high beams on. We knew that it was probably the same people that tried to stop the car back in the bridge. The truck followed us into Milford, then onto 275. That's when we came up with the great plan to lose them. We decided to head down some back roads because the Impala could outrun a full-size pickup. So we headed towards Loveland. We went speeding down some back roads and past the old bullet factory, and this truck never slowed down. As our excitement worked into panic, my friend from the back seat opens his window and begins to throw stuff at the truck. He started with tapes and empty soda cans and other stuff. Then he threw the knife he pulled from the tree, and as soon as he threw the knife, the truck began to slow down and fall back. He continued to throw things at the truck, now down to change he had in his pocket, and we went around a turn in the road and down a long straight stretch of road, and the truck never came around the turn. Later that night, we ended up in Blanchester, Ohio, and we stopped to get gas. I went in to get something to drink and tried to calm myself down. My friend that was driving the car never drove that car again. Several weeks later, he traded the car off. None of us see each other anymore, but for about a year after this incident, My friend that was driving the car and I worked together and rode to work every night. One night, he asked me if I remember seeing any faces or something during that night. We started to talk about it, and neither of us remember seeing a face from the people reaching into the car, but we did remember that the arms were bare and that they moved very quickly. To this day, this is the only time I have talked about what happened. I drove down that road one time since then, and I did not slow down at all. Number 3. I was doing a nighttime delivery and I lived in a very rural town. This night was very foggy with poor visibility, which was rare this time of year. As I was driving down a dirt road, I see this person jump in front of my car. I feel an impact in front of my bumper screeching to a stop. I quickly got out of my car. The man was on the ground in front of my car. He was wearing a black hoodie over his head. As I was about to bend down to touch him, I heard a voice from inside the woods crying for help. I turned around without a second thought and ran into the woods in the direction of the scream. I yelled out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Complete silence, but the sounds of the crickets. Then, I started to feel like I was being watched. I see a shadowy figure just about 10 feet away from me hiding behind a tree. I yell, "Are you okay?" But nothing. The figure just stands there in front of the tree. It seemed as if it was staring at me for hours. I got so scared I ran back into the direction of my car. When I got there, the man that was laying on the ground was gone. I hopped in my car and drove away, and I decided to head towards my delivery address anyway. I was shaken, but just glad I got out of there. I walked up to the door, and a lady opened the door. As I'm giving her change, she looks past me in the direction of my car and says, "They're letting you guys have delivery partners now?" I was confused and asked her what she meant, and she told me, "You have someone with you sitting in your car." I looked back and saw someone sitting in the back seat of my car. I called the cops from the customer's house phone and they arrived shortly after. But the person in my car was already gone. The scariest thing about this was that the cops found a blood-stained knife on the floor of my back seat. I am haunted by this event every day. I can genuinely tell you it's painfully scary to imagine how things could have gone if I didn't do that last delivery. Number 4. This happened 4 years ago when I was in high school. I was told to do my last delivery, so I get in my old car and headed out. I live upstate in the country, so all the deliveries were long drives. I remember the sun was starting to set, so I would say it was about 7 o'clock. I'd say after 15 minutes of driving, I finally got there. It was a very old house made completely out of wood. It was sitting all by itself, surrounded by forest. The lawn was completely unkept, and I was used to all this, so I didn't think anything of it. I took the pizza to the front door, and there was no doorknob, so I knocked and yelled, "It's the pizza guy, with your pizza." Nothing, so I repeated. Suddenly, I heard footsteps from the inside heading to the door and stop. But they didn't open the door. They just stood there. I yelled again, "It's the pizza guy." A low voice said from beyond the door, "Bring it to the back of the house." I was reluctant and I asked him, "Are you sure, sir?" No answer. I was about to walk back to the car, but I didn't want to have a problem with my boss. Last time I brought back the pizza, I was almost fired. So, I treaded lightly as I made my way to the back of the house through the brush. I came across a figure of someone sitting in a chair in the opposite direction in the porch, staring off into the distance. "Excuse me, sir. I have your pizza." But it didn't move, nor talk. I repeated myself, but nothing. I hear a voice coming from the door just past the silent figure.
"Psst, psst. Hey, over here."
I look in the direction of the whisper. I just see this man poking his head through the old door. He had this weird, unnatural smile, as if he knew something that I didn't. He says,
"Come here. I want to show you something."
I was so scared I ran back to my car and drove away. As soon as I got back in town, I called the cops. I got a call back from the police, who informed me that there was no one there, nor were there any signs of anyone being there for a long time. I quit my job a few days later. I have no idea what would have happened to me if I had gone up to that man, and I don't want to know. Number 5. I will never forget this night. The pizza place I worked in was about to close when the phone rang. I was working the counter alone that night, so I picked up the phone and there was a complete silence, so I hung up. About a minute later, the phone rings again, so I pick up. Still silence. I was about to hang up again when I heard a weak, cold voice of an old lady, and she said that she wanted a regular pie to be delivered. I was very polite, but inside I was steaming. I wanted to go home and end my shift. I called my boss that there was another delivery. He said I had to go, but I could close up after. I was upset, but I knew that late calls usually give me good tips, so I told the lady I would be at her home shortly. But she had already hung up, so I told the chief one more order. The house was 7 miles away. It was a very small house, so when I got there I rang the doorbell. But there was no answer. The lights were off. I rang again, but nothing. I was about to walk away when I see the curtains move, and there was a shadowy figure at the window. I couldn't see who it was, so I got closer to the window. It was the elderly lady, about 70 years old, and she stood there just looking at me with a blank look on her face. I told her that I had her pizza, but she had no response, and I thought that she probably didn't hear me, so I screamed it louder. She looked at me and smiled, but not a normal smile, a bone-chilling, eerie smile. I still remember to this day that woman's face with that horrible smile. I was so freaked out I just turned around and walked to my car with the pizza. I texted my boss to tell him I couldn't deliver the pizza. When I looked out the passenger side window to see the woman standing outside by my car with the same evil smile, I put my car in drive and floored it. My boss never made me make a late night delivery again. Number 6. So, before I begin, this is a string of events happening from 2014 to now, April 2016. I live in a small town in Oklahoma with a population of 300, mostly old people and druggies, but it's been okay living until recently. In 2014, I shared a story on Let's Not Meet about how I went into my dad's empty house and was confronted by 3 men who were camping out in there. But really, things didn't start going downhill until this January. I have 3 horses, one next to my house, and a mother and a foal on a lot basically 3 blocks away from my house. Now, the fence that I have on the lot is a fix of panels, wooden and metal fencing connected by barbed wire. People have been known to unite the ties just to be assholes, so part of the fence sags. Part of the fence sags unless I fix them. I'm pretty tall, 6 foot, and muscular for a girl, so I could be intimidating if I was pissed off enough. And to make what I'm saying more clear, here is a layout of me and my neighborhood's land. It was nearly 11 PM. I had fed my horses and decided to fix a tie on the fence. I heard laughing coming from the other end of the block, near my neighborhood's house. I look, and under the streetlight, I see 2 people running from one of my neighbor's yards, and I'm guessing they've seen the beam of light coming from my phone, so they dove into the ditch. I just kinda shrugged it off, wanting to finish the fence. Something told me to look up again, so I shined my light and looked up. And when I did, they were now in the field my neighbor had for her horses. They then dove back onto the ground. It was then I noticed the gaze on my horse's face. She and her baby were staring contently at the people in the field. Keep in mind, I had just given them their feed, and it takes a lot to get horses to stop eating unless they had to. That was somehow my only clue that I couldn't be in trouble. I looked back again and mumbled to Rain, the mare, that I was going to finish the tie and get the fuck out of there. 5 seconds later, I look up, without the light, and They're closer, on the ground. I didn't finish the tie. I just pushed my tools back into my Carhartt jacket and got ready to leave. Fuck this, I said again. I looked down to prop the wire where it wouldn't drag on the ground. When I hear laughing, I look up, without my light again, and they're running towards me, laughing like crazy. I was pissed. I knew they were threatening me, and that was a big mistake. I whipped my knife out, shined my light, and yelled, "Hey!" Once I did that, they ran back where they came from and down the alley. I was still pissed, so I jumped in my pickup and sped down the alley and tried to look for them, but couldn't find them. I figured out where they came from, behind my neighbor's house where she had kept her trailer, which was near where her horses like to hunker down for the night in the winter. So, what I could have guessed, they may have been looking to steal her trailer. I later told my neighbor who spread the word. And somehow, a week later, I found a post that was cut up light pole that had been dug 2 feet deep, fallen into the pen, and because of that position, I knew my horses couldn't knock it over. Someone had to have dug it and pushed it in. The post weighed about 300 pounds, so they would have had to use a vehicle. So unfortunately I was out until 3 AM fixing the fence in the February cold. Now, I've been finding sections of my fence down, and every time I fix it, it just goes back down. Then, last Friday, we caught a guy who was clearly a meth user, trying to steal my grandfather's work trailer at 2 in the damned afternoon. When he was questioned by my grandpa, he said,
Jeremy the CEO
told him to pick it up. That by the time I ran out with my gun, the guy sped off. But a week or so before, cops were called because a man in a van was trying to pick up kids around the area. This happened on a Wednesday, a day there was an above average number of kids playing around in town due to church activities. Cops were called and went to the preacher's house and interviewed 10 kids ranging from 5 to 13. Then, today, cops were called to the water tower because they found a body. I don't know much about this instance due to the fact that they haven't released anything yet. All I know is that I seen tons of cops and a sheriff of a neighbouring county. But things are getting bad, with no law in town. The druggies and the sex offenders around here are getting braver. I'll make sure to update wherever shit happens. Here is a video of the layout of my land.
Okay guys, just a quick little update video. I wanted to show y'all the layout of everything I was talking about that I drew in that map. Anyway, here are my 2 horses, Rain the big one, Montana the little filly over here. Wanna say hi? Anyway, this right here, say it's all along the pen. There's a kind of, you can't see very good right now, I don't know why I filmed it right now, but, and it all the way around. Well, I was standing, like, about right here. You can see that this, like, I was actually fixing this post right here. You can see people like to push them in, and not me apart from the horses, but anyway, I was standing right there, and did you see where that light pole is? And there's one right behind this house right here. That's where I seen him run through, and I started kind of making my way towards this way, and then, like, they were running like right, kind of doing like a little bit like running like right through there. And yeah, that's basically what, and then they ran right through that alley, and I drove through that alley because it's big enough for me to fit my truck through there. But yeah, as you can see, a bunch of fence over there is right down right now, a little bit back here, and you can't see it. Let me try to, this doesn't work. Okay, but right in between there, you might be able to see it, but that's where the fence post was dug up. Anyway, I gotta get done here. I'll update if anything. I haven't seen any cops around today, there hasn't been much going on today, or like since I posted. Yeah, but actually no, I lied. My neighbors were like domestic violence, some domestic issues going on, but anyway, thank you Redditors of Let's Not Meet for posting. Thank you for your concern, and I will see you later. Bye.
Number 7. This happened to me when I was about 10 or 11 years old. In my country, it's normal for elementary schools to have soccer tournaments for the kids in mostly the last 2 grades in elementary. I decided I was going to support the kids by myself in my grade, since we had a few good football players on the team, and I obviously wanted them to win. I head over there on my bike, and as I'm heading over there, it started to rain really hard, like tropical rainforest hard, but for some reason, me being the introvert that I am, I decided I was going to hang out by myself at an intersection that was near the field where the tournament was being held. All of a sudden, a white van,
Damn, Daniel?
stops in front of me because the lights turned red, and I see a guy, 30ish I think, with blonde hair and very friendly face, roll down his windows and call out to me. He said to me that he wanted to take me to the main intersection, which was 200 meters away, because it was raining really hard and didn't want me to get wet, which was BS because I was already soaked. Instantly, I got a gut feeling saying something is off about this guy, and I remember feeling really torn because one side of me was saying just go with this guy, he means well, and the other side was saying that this was not right. So I politely declined his offer, but he kept on asking and I kept declining and started to back away from his van. The light turned green and he said okay and drove off, and I thought this was the last I'd seen of him. About 5 to 8 minutes later, the same white van,
Back at it again.
stops in front of me again. The guy rolls down his window and asks if I'm sure that I don't want a lift. He was just going to drive me to the main intersection apparently, and was going to put my bike in the back of the van. This is when I really started to get worried and said no thank you and started to ride off towards the nearest gas station since there were a lot of people there. I was really scared, so I waited for about 10 minutes at the gas station before I quickly jumped on my bike and went full speed towards the field where there were about 1,000 people, and I never saw this guy again. To this day, I can still recall the guy's face and that he seemed really friendly. I will probably never know if his intentions were right, but it felt really off, especially after he came back a second time. I also wonder if he might have done it to other children that were more receptive, since he seemed genuinely nice, and not at all like a creepy old man. Number 8. This happened when I was about 12 years old, and I will never forget what happened in that airport bathroom. I'm a male, by the way. When I was 12, we were going on vacation to England. We had just landed, and due to me not being able to go to the bathrooms on airplanes, I had to go really bad. My dad said he'd wait outside the bathroom for me to finish. Now, the urinals had no walls between them, so there was no separation between people. There was only one guy in the bathroom. He looked to be about 45 or 50, and he was wearing a suit with a vest. I was never comfortable going in urinals that had no walls, but I had to go really bad. When I got to the urinal, the man shuffled quickly to the one next to me. He was oddly close, I remember. He unzipped his pants and started doing his business, but he kept staring at me. I was getting very uncomfortable at this point. After he finished, he shuffled over quickly to the door and just stood there, facing the door. I washed my hands, then went to the door to get out. He turned around and he never zipped up his pants. He just presented himself to me. He stared at me smiling and then said,
You like what you see, little boy?
I ran out of that fucking bathroom as fast as I could. The thing is, I didn't tell my parents until 5 years after. How stupid of me. Number 9. For reference, I am a 17-year-old female in Australia, and I live a half-hour drive out of town. It was about 10:30 PM, and I had just finished work. I was in the close shift, and it was a Tuesday night, so naturally it was dead and nobody was around. I was driving home alone, and I was stuck behind this 4WD ute thing. Not good with cars, sorry. And I needed to get into the next lane. He was indicating but wasn't actually going anywhere, so I indicated and overtook him into the next lane over. As I was level with him, he began veering towards me, and all I could think was how much it was gonna cost to fix this shit. So I slammed my hand on the horn and made the fuck bro gesture as I passed him. In an awkward coincidence, the lights turned red and we stopped side by side. He motioned for me to wind the window down, and I obliged. I was about to apologize, but I didn't even get a word out before he started screaming at me. He called me a cunt, a fucking bitch, and a stupid fucking pea platter mongrel, and then threatened to ram into my arse on the motorway. I was tired. It was late and I couldn't be bothered with him, so I just rolled my eyes at him and wound the window back up while he was talking. That royally pissed him off. He turned bright red and I saw him reach down and his car door opened. I panicked and floored it through the red light onto the motorway. I thought I was alright for a second, but then I saw him in my mirror speeding up behind me. He was clearly speeding to catch up to me, since I was going like 10k's over the limit. He had his high beams on and kept flashing them. He was right up behind me, and all I could think of was what he'd said about crashing into me. So I tried to go a little faster. I was looking for his number plate in the mirror so I could report him, but either the lights were too bright for me to see, or there was nothing there at all. And there is no way in hell I was going to stop after that performance before. I finally got off the motorway, and he was still behind me, and I was a little paranoid that he was following me, even though the motorway only really led to that one area. It could have still been a coincidence. So I pulled up into the nearest street and he was still behind me. So I promptly did a U-turn, and when the guy did it as well, I realized he was absolutely following me. I was about 20 minutes away from home at this point, and I didn't want to lead him anywhere near my house, so I decided on a split decision to go to the nearest police station to hopefully get him off my arse. Unfortunately, the nearest police station closed at 9:30, and I only ended up pulling into a dark, empty car park. I pulled over, facing the entrance so I could see if he had followed me. I didn't see him coming in, thankfully, and I figured he'd chickened out once he saw the police station. I debated calling the cops, since I didn't think I was in any danger anymore. That was until I noticed out of the corner of my eye a certain white ute slowly creeping up on my left, with its lights off. Once again, I panicked and floored it out of the car park and back towards the main road. I had no idea where I was going, no intention to pull over, and no clue who to call. I was going in the complete opposite direction of my house. I eventually spotted a nice, brightly lit petrol station and pulled into there, parking as close to the doors as I possibly could. I jumped out, frantically waved my arms around at the doors. They lock them at night and have to be manually opened. When I was let in, I started screaming at the poor lady at the register to lock the doors and that someone was following me. I was absolutely terrified, but thankfully she was quick on the uptake and locked the doors. I realized I'd left my phone in the car, but she offered to call the police. I was keeping an eye on the road outside while the clerk called the cops. I absolutely saw that car drive past, but he didn't come in. The clerk waited with me for the cops to show up, and eventually they did. It was almost 11 by the time they got there. I had literally never been happier to see a cop car in my life. They asked me to describe the guy and his car, and asked for the registration. I gave them what I could, and one of them drove me home. I haven't heard any follow-ups from anyone, but it was absolutely terrifying enough so that I asked to be taken off night shift for a little while. I've only been driving for a little under a year, but honestly, I don't think anything is gonna top that experience. Number 10. Given my pretty busy schedule as a 17-year-old student, and the fact that I have household duties to attend to, I don't always have the most flexible time to do everything, such that sometimes I have to compromise times when something arises. I'm not sure if this is important, but I am a male, whom I dearly love with all my heart. However, the fact that she's only 2 years old and is always bouncing around the house means that I have to take her out at least twice a day, so that she can do her dog stuff outside. This one particular day, I had to quickly go somewhere ways off for a club event, so I had to take the bus because my parents could not drive me that day. It would be fun and all if the bus schedules would coordinate. Their schedules did not meet, and one of them came so late that I came home an hour late. This time, it was already around 9 PM, and I still had to finish chores up and do my homework. I figured that this in total would take around an hour to finish, so I put off walking Avi and getting straight to work. However, I was wrong. I practically finished by 11:30 PM, and I was dead tired. However, Avi was whining and licking me profusely, so I had to go out to walk her. Getting her leash and my shoes, I went out and decided to make a few rounds around my neighborhood complex. I usually make my last day walk at around 10 PM anyways, and this has occurred where I walked her really late at night, so it doesn't really bother me at all. Furthermore, there is usually nobody out at this time, because most of the people in my neighborhood are elderly people, and they're usually asleep at this time. So at this time I practically had my guard down and was just aimlessly walking Avi. Now, my complex is like a square, and I plan to make rounds around that. Imagine a square where the 4 lines are the major roads. My house is exactly nearby the bottom left corner. There is a major road near the uppermost line road, but other than that, it's just the small roads going through my complex. Within the square, there are small roads and alleyways that I come to know, which does come in useful when playing hide and seek with the neighborhood kids. One major factor that you have to know is that there are very little streetlights that illuminate the way. The major road is brightly lit, but there are only 2 in the other complex roads. My house is besides a rather well maintained streetlight. This becomes important later. So anyways, I was walking Avi rather calmly, and without really being awake, I just walk like a zombie. I know the way well, so it didn't become a bother for me. Everything went rather well as I made my way up to the major road and all the way to the rightmost road when I noticed someone in front of me. It was a man wearing a hood, a cap, so like basically clothes that seemed to conceal himself. I was wearing a blue jacket, jeans and sneakers. The thing that surprised me the most was that the man was also walking a dog. It looked like a pit bull. I'm not great with identifying dog breeds, sorry, but it seemed kind of small to be one. Something you have to know about Avi is that she is very sweet, docile, and she does not bark unless she senses something is wrong or just out of place. For example, she would bark when someone is behind the door. She barely barks, so when she does, I become more alert. Anyways, I know most of the neighborhood dogs as we are a pretty tight-knit community, and I would know their names and appearance, but I have never seen this dog nor its owner. Now, looking back, I should have just said hello and went on my way, but half asleep me was not in the right mood. Abby obviously gravitated towards the dog and they started playing and scratching and whatnot. While I was just dragging myself there, Abby literally a few seconds later started barking like crazy. I mean, she was growling and barking really loud at the man. He suddenly pulled the pit bull away and just went on his way. I was just like, whatever, until I noticed that he was making glances at me as he shuffled his way out. I didn't really take any notice, and I called out sorry as I tried to restrain Abby. After that, I went on my way. Now, this is where I think it got me really creeped out. Remember how there are only so many streetlights? Well, most of them aren't maintained that well, so they only illuminate a small portion of the area. As I walked down the road, I suddenly had this feeling that I was being watched, but I brushed it off as just my imagination. As I went along, I went through the first streetlight and saw the man just standing there, looking to the right. I thought I'd go up and apologize about Abby, but as I do, Abby starts going maniacal again, so I just went to the other side and waved at him. He then looked my way, and I swear I had the most chilled feeling go up my spine. I don't know how to describe it, but at that point my instinct kicked in and I ran. Guess what? He gave pursuit. I practically freaked the fuck out and I just blindly ran. I'm a pretty fast runner as I do cross country, but the season ended long ago and I wasn't exactly in shape, but the adrenaline of that just gave me a huge speed boost and I sprinted out of there. Abby runs fast as well, so it wasn't hard for her to run alongside me. At this point, I was in the bottom road and running towards my house. But after reading many stories here, the idea of not going to where my house is the next course of action. He was behind me still running, but I was quite ahead. Instead of going to my house, I immediately turned right into a small playground and alleyway and went in there. I thought I was safe, when I remembered Avi's collar making a clinging sound whenever she walks, so I practically heard him turn and went towards my direction. Quickly thinking, I picked her up and ran towards an alleyway that led to the main road. This alleyway is notorious for having tall grass, think Pokemon tall grass, but it didn't matter to me because I was just too scared. I came to the main road and I immediately turned towards the leftmost road and out of breath. At this point, I was holding Avi in my left hand and I took my phone out in my right hand to call someone when I realized it was dead. At this exact moment, I heard a dog barking and running, and I knew it was him because a few seconds later he came behind me. I was really out of breath and I felt like collapsing, but I ran anyways. And I'm not sure which thread it was, but it said something about how it's best to start screaming and shouting like a madman to draw attention, which is what I started doing. I don't know who posted it, but you may have just saved my life, because as I was near the end of the road and this guy was literally several paces behind me, a car pulled up and a woman opened her window and then started screaming at me. The man literally stopped and ran the opposite direction. Right at that moment, I was just on the ground, super exhausted, while Avi looked like she really gave no shits about what happened. Right at that moment, I was just on the ground, super exhausted, while the woman, who happened to be my neighbor, who's a middle-aged woman that lives with her elderly mum, went out of the car and was like chewing me out for screaming. She said she was driving down the road when she heard screaming and saw me running, so she assumed that was some kind of escaped mental detainee, and that when she saw it was me, she threatened to tell my parents. I apologized and I explained to her what just happened, and she was just like, "Who? What the fuck?" and apologized for berating me. She then took me home and told my parents, and they got super worried and everything, and my neighbor later told me how smart it was of me to do that by drawing attention to myself, even though I might have disturbed the neighborhood. I think that really saved my hide. From that point on, I am now never going to walk Avi after 10 PM anymore. Hey guys, it's the Grim Raider. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. It took a while, but it was worth it. Anyways, if you haven't already, why not subscribe to my channel? And also, why not check out my other videos by clicking on the links on the screen or in the description box. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and until then, you will hear from me in the next video. It was a safe place to stash your car, but from here you have to hike back about half a mile uphill through the woods. The trailhead started at the end of the parking lot across the creek, but there was always a chance that you would disturb someone making out or shooting up. Now, when I was in high school, there were rumors that a satanic cult was performing rituals and holding black masses at the plateau. Fellow students who lived in McBride claimed to have seen their campfires and the carcasses of sacrificed animals. At school, one of my friends told me about a severed deer's head on a stick that was positioned to look out towards the street. After school, I decided to drive past the plateau, and I saw the deer's head. This just incensed my curiosity, but I had to go to work in a couple of hours, so I decided to come back later that night. In high school, I worked at a national supermarket and normally got off work at around 10 PM. My uniform consisted of a black pair of jeans, work boots and a brown smock, the perfect attire for lurking around in the woods at night. I decided to stash my car in the Falling Springs Tavern parking lot and take the long trail through the woods to the plateau. I remember there was a brilliant moon that night. You almost didn't need a flashlight because the moon shining through the tree canopy was bright enough to light up the trail. The moonlight through the tree branches would calm myself. If they were able to, surely they would have called me out by my name during the foot chase or while they were searching. Dupo High School had around 300 students, and like every small school, everyone knew everybody. So I was a little apprehensive about the possibility of having to face members of a satanic cult Monday morning. Monday came and went. Tuesday came and went. and nobody approached me about being up on the plateau. Wednesday, I was standing in the cafeteria lunch line, and I saw a girl in a black hoodie wearing a cast on her right leg. The same leg the person would have broken that night on the plateau. I know she lived on McBride with her aunt and recently transferred in from neighbouring Cahokia High School, but she was too new to know me, and she hung out with a different clique. Had she not been the new girl in school, she probably would have recognised me that night. I decided to keep the incident to myself and not to share my experience with any of my friends. I had gotten away clean, and I saw no need to gossip and stir up a hornet's nest for myself. Number 2. It was the summer of 1994, and me and some of my friends were driving around in my friend's late model 2-door hardtop Impala. We decided to go pay this cult a visit. We were headed down Route 50 just outside Owensville. Number 1. In Dupont, Illinois, where the long end of McBride Avenue meets the bluffs, there is a rocky outcropping known as the plateau. The plateau sits about 100 feet above the street, and it's a perfectly flat surface that overlooks the entire neighborhood. There were always rumors of the plateau being haunted. During the 70s and early 80s, it was a popular hangout for kids who liked to party and drink beer. When you visited the plateau, there was several years worth of graffiti painted every flat surface. Most of the graffiti was either class of 19XX, someone loves some other person, or 420 related. Regardless, it was a cool place to check out. There was always a long street at the base of the plateau where you could park. From here, the hike to the plateau was rather a short walk up a steep hill. The problem with parking here was that if the cops saw your car, they would either give you a ticket or wait to harass you when you came down. The safest place to park was half a mile down the road at the Falling Springs Tavern. Since the bar was always filled with patrons, there were always vehicles in the parking lot. When I got up to leave, several people stepped out of the darkness wearing what appeared to be black hoodies. I started to run towards the trail, and of course, they decided to give chase. One of them was fast enough to get between me and the trail. This person then turned and started running towards me. They stumbled into a deep fissure in the rock surface and tripped. When they fell, I heard what sounded like their legs snapping. The person started screaming in agony, and it sounded like it could have been a girl. A few of them broke off their pursuit to check on their friend, and the rest continued to pursue me down the trail. In my youth, I was a pretty fast runner, and I was able to gain a little distance. Then, I decided to dart off into the woods. About 25 feet off the trail, I found the perfect place to hide. I heard them pass by me, but I remained still. A few minutes later, I heard them coming back up the trail, shining their flashlights into the woods looking for me. Lucky for me, I was pretty good at hide and seek. I stayed in my hiding place for a few more minutes until I was sure they were gone. Then I continued as quickly and as quietly as I could back to my car. Now, it was a Friday night when I decided to explore the plateau, and I was a little worried about going back to school on Monday morning. I worried if they were able to identify me, but I thought past these eerie shadows. When the wind blew, the branches would sway and the shadows would move, so it looked as if everything in the woods was moving towards you in the darkness. It was the perfect setting for visiting a haunted site. As in most scary situations, time seems to slow down. It seemed like it took me forever to reach the plateau. I remember how bright it was that night when I emerged out of the woods and into the clearing that was plateau. Because of the full moon, everything was perfectly clear. There was this bright clearing surrounded by a curtain of darkness formed by the woods behind you. Out in the distance, you could see the multicolored lights that made up the St. Louis skyline. Beneath the plateau, the only thing I could see was a single streetlight. As I walked across the plateau, I saw a pentagram painted on the ground covered in dried candle wax. There was also some sort of rune writing painted in various places around the pentagram, so it definitely looked like someone was trying to hold a cult ritual here. But what I didn't know was how long ago. I was sitting with my legs dangling over the edge of the cliff and admiring the view. I kept thinking I was hearing something off in the distance behind me, so I was constantly looking over my shoulder to see if anyone was there. Since I never saw anything, I continued to stay sitting on the edge and enjoying the view.